Hi, this is Dr. Richard Herbold coming to you today to talk a little bit about shoulder pain or shoulder mechanics. So if I had my druthers and my choice of something not to treat, shoulder problems would probably be on the top of the list because they're so complicated. A shoulder is a suspensory joint. So what I mean by that is it kind of hangs off the body. When you look at the hip, it's a ball and socket joint. It has a deep socket that holds that bone in. And unfortunately, the shoulder, being so delicate as it is, the shoulder is just kind of hanging and suspended by muscles, tendons, and ligaments. So don't get me wrong, we have wonderful, wonderful results with dealing with shoulders, and I have a lot of magic that we use in the office to be able to repair those and to be able to accelerate healing. But also understand the complexity of a shoulder is pretty dynamic. So when we talk about shoulder problems, and not to be disparaging about that, the shoulder is greatly dependent, as everything in a joint, by mechanics. So what happens with time and age, extension, which is holding everything back, starts to become flexion. So you look at people in the department stores, especially as they age, those older folks start to get that flex posture, arms start to turn in, get a little junk in the trunk, kind of the butt starts to stick out a little further. You kind of look like, the walking apes in that mechanical position. And part of that is because we're losing neurological facilitation. What I mean by that is extension, which keeps us upright and healthy, is starting to become more dominantly flexion. Now, part of that could be from physical activity. So a lot of people who work out don't work all the different postural muscle groups. So if you're not working your extensors to make sure you stay on that, and if you're not aware of your posture and you're not doing everything that you can to stay upright, especially if you're working really dominant muscles, guys in particular, we like those big biceps, we like those big pecs, we like those big dominant muscles. All of those bring us forward. Now our extensors, like our rotator cuff, which is a common injury in the shoulder itself, is all an extension. It's on the back of the shoulder itself, and there's smaller muscles. So if our dominant muscles are bringing us forward, and our joint mechanics, as far as positional sense is related to the rest of the structure, is becoming more and more flexed in forward position, our extensors are constantly being stretched, and they're overstretched. So that's why when you give somebody a massage and you're on the back of their shoulders, most of the muscles on the back are more tender than the front, because those muscles are no longer in a neutral position, and they're constantly being overstretched and stimulated and irritated. If you overstimulate a muscle, eventually the lactic and pyruvic acid that builds up in that muscle from metabolic waste, what I mean by that is basically burning sugars to turn into energy, all that garbage that accumulates in the muscle that should be picked up by your lymphatic system is not being expedited and removed through our kidneys and through our urinary system and through excretion, through sweat and perspiration. So that's why during a workout in particular and throughout the course of the day, hydration is so critical. Getting enough proteins and carbs and fats for fuel and distribution. There are strategies also with exercise about after exercise and before exercise, how we prepare our muscles, how we prepare our mechanics, and then be reasonable about our exercise program. So when we look at the shoulder, we're going to talk a little bit on our next video about approaches, but just know that the shoulder is a very complicated mechanical system, and it's greatly dependent on extension. So the main piece of advice in the world, and especially talking about shoulders, is constantly pre-frame yourself as sitting up, sitting straight, and watching your ergonomics, especially if you're on computers and doing all different types of procedures and activities during the day where you're in that seated flex posture. Take a break, make sure you're pulling back, pull your shoulder blades together, pinch your shoulder blades together, bring your shoulders back instead of going into that flex posture. So that's great advice for anybody and everybody, especially if they do have a shoulder problem. And moving forward and evaluating that professionally is part of what I'm always happy to do with our clients. So I hope you found this helpful and instructive. And once again, it's always a pleasure. This is Dr. Richard Herbold at Capital District Vitality Center. Thank you.